Breaking news on a Friday night. Huge trade in the NBA. Karl-Anthony Towns going from the Minnesota Timberwolves to the New York Knicks. Julius Randle, Donte, DiVincenzo going back the other way. There's a draft pick going there too, but that may not be as good of a draft pick as it looks on the surface. We're going to break it all down. I'm Trevor Lane. This is the Basketball Bulletin. Before we dive into it, everybody, we've been getting our subscribers up heading into the season, so make sure you hit that subscribe button for us. We'd appreciate it. Donnie Freeman joining me. Donnie, this was a shock. I couldn't believe it when this came across my timeline. What was your reaction to this trade?
I was like, my first reaction is like, wow, the Knicks are really, really going for it this offseason.
Right?
They feel like they've got a great chance to make not one, but two blockbuster trades in the same offseason is really crazy. So that was my initial reaction. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, the Knicks getting Mikal Bridges early on in the season and now getting Karl-Anthony Towns. We knew they needed help in the middle. Mitchell Robinson, it was going to be out probably till sometime in December. They already lost Isaiah Hartenstein. We were talking about Julius Randle playing the center position, which I was okay with. Tom Thibodeau said he didn't want to do it for more than maybe 10, 15 minutes a night tops. So now they go and they get their guy. They get their big, and people will talk about Karl-Anthony Towns. Is he a good defensive player? Not necessarily, but he can play the five. He can do that. And so the Knicks go and they get the best player of the deal. Now, there is more to come to this trade. This trade, if it's just DiVincenzo and Randle going to Minnesota, Karl-Anthony Towns going to the Knicks, the trade does not work. It is not a legal trade. What has to happen is the third team has to get involved. And we've heard the Charlotte Hornets are going to be the team. Tim Bontemps for ESPN had that. The Charlotte Hornets are going to get involved. They're going to take salary on from the Knicks in order to make this work. So there's still a few moving parts that are coming in here. There's a Detroit Pistons pick going from the Knicks to the Wolves. It's heavily protected and unlikely to convey this season, probably even next season. So I don't think that's an incredibly valuable pick, but it's part of the trade as well. But I agree with you, Donnie. I went, wow, the Knicks are really, really going for it. What did you think about the Minnesota side? How big of a downgrade is it for Minnesota to go from Karl-Anthony Towns to Julius Randle?
Yeah, I kind of feel like it almost hinges a bit on DiVincenzo a bit. I think that he is the upside here because I think it is a downgrade going from, Cat to Randle, especially because Randle has been dealing with a lot of injury issues as well recently. So that's another thing too. But I don't really know if I love the Randle piece. One thing that could potentially happen there, and this isn't my idea. I was actually on with Dan, and Dan, the Lakers fan, and he was bringing up how he would actually like to see Naz Reid start. And I was like, it would be a tough pill to swallow for Randle, but I would actually like this much more if Reid is now the starting forward on this team, and then Randle comes off the bench as like a combo big and can slot in that way. But otherwise, it's kind of weird. But I really, really do like DiVincenzo on this team.
So this, for the Wolves, first of all, it clears some long-term salary off your books. Randle's contract is shorter than Towns' contract, so that's something that it does. It allows the Wolves to play at least a similar style. When you've got Randle in the Karl-Anthony Towns spot, you have essentially a three-headed monster at the big rotation. You're going to rotate your 4 and your 5 spot. It's going to be Randle, Gobert, Naz Reid in some combinations, right? You're going to rotate those through those three guys. The money says Julius Randle should start. He's making double what Naz Reid makes. I think Randle would probably start, but Julius Randle may not be 100% to start the season. That was another factor here for the Knicks. I think the key here, can Randle shoot the three or not? Do we buy Julius Randle's three-point? Because Karl-Anthony Towns can shoot the hell out of the ball. He can shoot the three. Last season, we had Julius Randle shot 31% from deep. Now, maybe that changes somehow on this Minnesota team. Maybe he can shoot better there, but he's a career 33% shooter from behind the arc. That worries me a little bit, Donnie, about Gobert and Randle pairing. Because Gobert already has his own offensive issues, but he's certainly not going to space the floor. If Randle is shooting 31% from three, people aren't going to respect him behind the arc much, even though he can occasionally knock it in. That's my biggest concern for the Wolves. It's that Julius Randle can do some good things. He can help you on the boards. He can push the ball in transition. He can do a lot of stuff, but he can't shoot the three like Towns can. And so I'm worried a little bit about the Wolves' floor spacing. And I think you're absolutely right. Donte DiVincenzo is going to have to make up that difference and be an impact guard for them coming in.
Yeah, Randle, looking at his statistics here, he had one outlier season where he was really, really good from the 3 in 21.
Yeah.
But every other season, he's averaged to far below average, it looks like. So I'm not really expecting much from him in terms of that. He always has high volume, though. Like, he had 34% on 8 threes a game. That's very high volume in 22-23. So I think just the simple fact he's willing to take them, you have to say something about that. But otherwise, if he's not able to hit them at least a little bit better, maybe 34, 35% next season, then there are going to be some offensive issues there in terms of the spacing overall. And that would be the argument, because I do think Randle is starting. And I think there's a lot of reasons why, but obviously the money. But that would be my argument if I were to make that change, because Reed plugs in perfectly as a shooter, right? And so you get a lot more similar production to what Cat was able to give you last year. That would be my argument. But I like I said, I do think Randle is starting at least to start the season. But I think in terms of DiVincenzo, he is somebody that's gritty, that is a nice plug-in glue guy that can fit on this team. And I really, really do like the way that he came into his own last season and the last couple seasons with the shooting part of it.
His shooting,
and
great.
If he's able to replicate that, he is going to be so huge for this team. He's going to be a massive spark plug for them. And they just needed firepower, I feel like, last season. And so I think that DiVincenzo is the swing factor, because when you look at it and you're like, Cat is clearly the best player in this trade. And Cat was a bit up and down in the playoffs. He'd have some good games, some bad games, things like that. But I will say that I was, for the most part, pretty impressed with his production. And I do think on the Knicks, Cat will be better because his workload will go far down and he doesn't really have to do as much. And I think that in that role for the Knicks team, he's going to be amazing, especially alongside those other guys that could really bring the most out of him. So I like this trade. Ironically, it's very rare this happens, but I like the trade for both teams. Ironically, it just felt weird that both of these teams, but more so Minnesota, decided to give up the best player in the trade when they were on the doorstep of making it to the NBA Finals. So that's the only thing that's kind of weird. So
right, usually you see a team, because essentially Minnesota is, I don't know if they're fully a seller, but they're giving up the best player in the trade. You typically don't see a team that is knocking on the doorstep of the NBA Finals making that kind of move. That's a great point by you. Let's bring it down to this. If you had to pick a side, which team won the trade?
I think they both won the trade.
And chat, let us know. Let us know, everybody that's viewing, in the comments, who won this trade. So you think they both won? You're gonna call it a tie?
I think the ceiling is higher on the Knicks side, though.
Okay.
Because Randle's injury issues. What's Cat's games played? Because I know he had some injury issues as well. What is Cat's games played?
He did. He was out for a good chunk of last season. And by the way, Mitchell Robinson is again going to be out for sometime in December. Towns played 62 games last season for the Wolves,
and then the last,
which is actually more than I thought. And then what?
The last couple years prior to
the year before that, 29 games.
Yeah, see, I knew he was dealing with some injuries too, so it's kind of weird. I think that, like I said, I don't want to hold that as a knock solely against Randle, because Cat has had those same issues too. He started his career amazingly, though. My goodness, 82, 3 straight, 77, then started having issues. So that's kind of like, if he can return to what he was earlier in his career, then fine. And that may be a case could be made that maybe that happens because of a decreased workload. I think that the Knicks won it just because they got the best player here. But I do think that the Timberwolves are in an interesting spot, because I don't know that they got worse. I think they got better. It's just, I don't know if it's a marginal thing.
I think the Wolves are hoping they stayed even, that they didn't get worse.
At least, yeah.
I think there's the possibility they got worse. I think I like Donte DiVincenzo a lot, but there's the possibility, like, DiVincenzo has to do some heavy lifting here, because there's the possibility that Randle and Gobert together doesn't work that well. Yeah. And then you've got some issues, right, to try to figure out. Then Naz Reid becomes even more important, because he has to be the guy that plays next to Randle and the guy that plays next to Gobert, because he's conceivably the piece that makes both those guys work. So there's some complicating factors there for the Wolves. I look at it as though the Wolves are hoping they stayed even, that they didn't get worse. I'll tell you what, I believe the Knicks won the trade. And here's why. Here's why I think the Knicks won. And I wish I did. Yeah, I know you said the Knicks won, so I wish it would be a better show if I could disagree with you. But I do think the Knicks won. And here's why. The Knicks won because of the Boston Celtics. If we want to take it down to, we can talk about, did they get more value? Are they better as a team? All those things. Great questions. The most important question, though, is does this get the Knicks closer to winning a championship? And the answer is yes. The reason why is because in a Knicks-Celtics matchup, on one end of the floor, Kristaps Porzingis was going to be pulling the Knicks big away from the basket. That's what the Celtics do. And on the other end, the Knicks were not going to be able to return the favor. It was going to be Jericho Sims. It was going to be Mitchell Robinson. But look, they have their qualities as players, especially Mitchell Robinson on the offensive glass, but they're not going to have that kind of floor spacing. They're not going to drag the Celtics away from the basket and create those lanes. Now they can do that. Now, in an offseason that's been all about matching up with the Celtics, that's a big part of getting Mikal Bridges. You look across Boston and you see all these guys that are two-way players that can defend, that can handle the basketball, that can play make. They've got a bunch of guys that can do that stuff on Boston. The Knicks said, hey, fine, we're going to build our team the same way. We're going to get Bridges. We're going to get OG Anunoby. We've got these guys that can do all these things. Josh Hart is in the mix there as well. Now you add Towns, and you can return the favor to the Celtics and pull them out of the paint. This is about the Boston Celtics and being the best matchup possible, and that is by mirroring Boston the best way that they can. So in my mind, the Knicks won because I think if all their pieces are healthy, this Knicks team is closer to winning a championship than a fully healthy Knicks team yesterday.
Yeah, definitely. I just wonder with the Knicks, and I agree with everything you said. I just wonder with the Knicks about a couple of things. Firstly, they traded big for big. They still largely have the same problem in terms of very thin front court depth.
Sure.
And so you still have a lot of the same thing going on with Mitchell Robinson being out. A lot of it kind of hinges on him. And obviously,
he may end up having to go out in the deal. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. I guess that also is true. And I also really, really liked DiVincenzo for this team last year too. I feel like them losing his firepower can't go understated. We've talked about him from the other side. I think that matters here too.
The Villanova guys, they blew it up before we even got to see all the Villanova guys together.
They replaced him. They brought in McCallum. They were like, oh, actually, you know what? I think we're good. So sorry,
we're good. We've got enough.
Yeah.
So this is, again, I think this is a win for the Knicks. I know you've got it slight. I have this as a strong win for the Knicks. I think you have it more slight, but I'm curious, what does everybody think? Put it in the comment section. Again, the ultimate trade, there's going to be some more details coming out, but it's Julius Randle, Donte DiVincenzo to the Minnesota Timberwolves in exchange for Karl-Anthony Towns. Again, there's a draft pick that's going that's got some heavy protections on it. So that may not become something for the Wolves down the road. Eventually even turns into second-round picks, but that's the backbone of the trade. I get what Minnesota's doing here. They were probably going to have to make a difficult decision at some point. We'll see what this means for Rudy Gobert's long-term future with Minnesota now that they've maybe cleared some things up for long-term. So I understand why they had to make this. This is still a painful move for Minnesota. And for the Knicks, man, all summer, it's been, we're all in. Whatever it takes, we're all in. We're going to add the pieces we need. They added Bridges, and now they bookend this by adding Karl-Anthony Towns. The Knicks are ready. The Knicks are ready to roll, and I can't wait for opening night to see Knicks Celtics. This is going to be an exciting one. Now, Porzingis won't be there, so that'll, puts a little bit of a damper on it, but still, I think the Knicks have loaded up, and the Knicks are ready to take on Boston in the East. I think we now have two behemoths in the Eastern Conference. Knicks, Celtics, let's go.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And with the Knicks, it was kind of a little bit weird because this whole offseason, it's been about like, how is Randle even going to fit here? What are we doing with Randle? And so now all of a sudden you don't have any of those questions anymore. And I think they are in a prime position. If there was ever a time the Knicks could win, it's now. With this team, assuming they stay healthy, this is the roster. This is the time. And so it's so cool to see a team go all in, lay everything on the table, and decide this is the moment. So I'm really, really excited about this season. It's going to be a ton of fun.
That's right. All right, everybody, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Let us know who won the trade.